Good morning. Real quick pre-announcement. Cell phones, airplane mode, please. We are glad you are here by Amanda Schuber. If this is your first time here, or your 101st time, we are glad you are here. If you carry the weight of a weary world on your shoulders, or you entered through the doors with a song in your heart and a skip in your step, we are glad you are here. If you are the loudest voice in the town square, or the subtle hand behind the scenes, we are glad you are here. If you have failed once or 1,000 times, we are glad you are here. If you sing like angels or mumble behind the hymnal, we are glad you are here. This community is what it is because of your presence. So welcome into this space of love, support, justice, compassion, fellowship, and worship. We are glad you are here. Welcome to Eastrose Fellowship, everyone here in the chapel and online. A special welcome to first-time visitors. We are very glad you are here. I'm Eric Tschuy, your worship leader this morning. Our speaker is our fellow Unitarian and Oregonian, Janet Stevens from the UCS. Give her a good welcome. Which is the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Salem, UUCS. She was born and raised a Unitarian Universalist, a rarity, and is a member of the UCS celebrant team, sings in the choir, and participates in the homilist and storytellers team. I hope she'll tell us what that means. She works for the state of Oregon as a deputy public guardian, where she supports incapacitated adults with no other resources. Her sermon topic today is finding faith and inspiration in fiction. Okay, let's all take a moment right now to greet each other, but first, let's turn and look at the camera by the clock on the back wall and wave hello to our friends who are taking the service at home.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Kim.
Thank you. Well, this is very friendly conversation. We'll be having opportunities for more conversation after the service. Don't know if there's coffee, but at least conversation. Quick heads up, just an anticipation here. For those attending online, if you want to share a joy or concern later in the service, write it down in the chat, and then our staff will be able to bring us your words when the time comes. Eastrose is located in the homeland of the Upper Chinookan people, whose territory once spread across the life-giving plains and wetlands of the Wapato lowlands, along the Great River between Troutdale and Kalama. We acknowledge in particular the Multnomah and Shahala bands of Chinooks, as well as their neighbors, partners, and frequent visitors, the Clackamas, Cowlitz, Atfalati, Kalapuya, Molalla, Klickitat, and others. These peoples live among us today in cities, towns, and villages, on farms and military bases. Many Chinooks are dispersed across Northwest reservations. They also live near the mouth of the Columbia River and in Portland, across the country, and even the world. I can tell you something about that if you like afterwards. Although they have a distinct identity and a very well-attested history, the Chinooks are not formally recognized as a tribal nation by our government, and they are requesting our assistance in moving recognition forward. And now, Janet, I'm going to ask you to light the chalice, please. We have a magical little implement for doing that. This is a chalice lighting of gratitude for the earth by Karen Johnson, and I adapted it for this service. What if, when I light the chalice, you hear a welcome and an invitation to express gratitude from the earth? Gratitude for sunshine, fresh air, friends, frolicking animals, trees, clouds, flowers. As this flame of hope sheds light in your heart, tell me, what are you giving gratitude for?
Okay, our opening hymn is number 63. I'm going to play it all the way through once, and then we'll stand and sing the two verses.
Now we have a very special time, and this is Tara Toller and the children doing a story for all ages.
You're welcome. Our story today is What If, written by Samantha Berger and illustrated by Mike Carrotto. With a pencil and paper, I write and draw art to create many stories that come from my heart. But what if that pencil one day disappeared? I'd fold up the paper till stories appeared. And what if that paper was no longer there? I'd chisel the table and then carve the chair. And what if there wasn't a chair here at all? I'd chip and I'd peel at the paint on the wall. And what if there wasn't a wall anymore? I might build a story from boards in the floor. Without any floor, I could still use the land to sketch out a tale in the dirt with my hand. I could still shape the leaves. I could still sculpt the snow. I could still plant the flowers and make kingdoms grow. Without any land, I would still use the light to invent shadow stories the sun would ignite. If there was no light, I would still use my voice to sing out my stories, to chant and rejoice. I'd still have my body to twist and to bend, to dance out my stories, beginning to end. If I had nothing, but still had my mind, there'd always be stories to seek and to find. If I know nothing but one bit of fate, as long as I live, I will always create. As long as I live, I will always create. Go back to the classroom area.
So we're going to tie into our theme a little bit. So now please, if you are on the aisle, stand up and hold hands and form a bridge on either side. And we will send the children back to the classroom.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
Now we have something special. Our president, Cynthia Hopkins, is going to talk about canvas and why Eastrose is meaningful and special for her.
Each week between now and I believe it's mid-May, we will be having, or at least we hope to have, one of you get up here and talk briefly about what Eastrose means to you. And you'll be getting some mailings very soon about the canvas with all the details. Our canvas leader this year is Reverend Susie Matranga-Watkins. Thank you so much for answering the call. And a number of us are helping her. So without further ado, this is what Eastrose means to me. I chose to visit Eastrose Fellowship in 2009, looking for a place to nurture my spirit. In retirement, I began to realize just how much I neglected and needed this. I yearned for Sunday church, for rituals, for songs and words to touch my heart and soul, to give me hope and give me joy. I chose a small church because I felt it would be easier to get to know my fellow spiritual seekers and hopefully make new friends who shared my values. It was and still is very important to me that it be a community where people were not judged by the color of their skin, where they came from, or who they loved. I found those people here at Eastrose, and you have all become my friends. I have loved performing in speech choir. Thank you, Katie Tenike. And serving as a worship leader all these years. Eastrose means the world to me. I do not know how I would have gotten through years of pandemic shutdown or the loss of both my parents without this church community. So thank you all.
Thank you, Cynthia. The purpose of this church, a couple of basket carriers here. The purpose of this church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take up an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support the self-supporting church and its ministries. Here at Eastrose, we share half of our offering with a community nonprofit that we support. This month, it is East County Rising. East County Rising exists to provide opportunities to underrepresented Multnomah County residents to partake in issue-based electoral and campaign work with the goal of transforming East County for the better by educating and mobilizing voters, training progressive candidates, and working with elected officials. If you attend online, you may donate by visiting our website and clicking the donate button, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. The gifts of the congregation will now be most gratefully received. And ask for a couple of people to please.
Why this blank page, staring back at me, mocking like an affliction, fraught with dread? How can it hold such sway, this simple emptiness? Might it instead be a gift left on my doorstep overnight, waiting to be broken open with the dawn? A present, eager to emerge. If only I had a sense to hold the paper over a candle flame, its lemon juice message appearing like magic, clear and true. Each new day is like this, pure air, devoid of density, but for the weight of our own invention. Birds do not worry the morning or fret the rising sun. They wait, experiment, until its rays kiss their downy necks. Then, stretching, they turn to face the day and sing. To a group of lay leaders at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Salem. We call ourselves homilists and storytellers. We're not ordained, just a group of folks interested in sharing our thoughts with others. And I hear you've already heard from another one of us, and you're going to be hearing from more. It's a new ministry in our congregation, which began a couple of years ago, and we're still learning and growing our craft. Every couple of months, we gather for fellowship and support. After a vegetarian and vegan, gluten-free organic potluck, we share ideas and get guidance from Reverend Rick. In preparation for a recent meeting, Reverend Rick sent out an email. It began, "I would like for folks to bring a book or two that they'd like to share, something that could deepen our spirituality or wisdom." When I read that, I was so excited. I love books. I immediately thought of a dozen or more books that I'd like to share, something that have been a source of inspiration, that has shown me insight into the human condition, that had given me guidance. So many books have brought me comfort and helped me find meaning when my world was in chaos, or when I was looking for answers to questions about life or how to be in the world. Then I read on, and I panicked. The next line said that he was especially thinking of ancient texts, and he listed the examples of such writings as the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada. I have read these, or parts of them. They are, without a doubt, beautiful works, worthy of study and containing ageless wisdom. I've also looked through traditional spiritual texts, the Bible, the Quran, the Eightfold Path. I have some experience with the writings of those who are considered to be great sages. I have been moved by their words. But I must confess, that my spiritual journey has been most influenced by the writers, books, and characters that can be found in the fiction section. Fiction is a fantastic way to expand the mind and understanding. It's a complement to our spiritual journey. It shows us that it's okay to be different, to face challenges, to be frightened or lonely. If we open our minds to the idea that stories and tales and legends are not just entertainment, but when read and studied seriously, can show us that we are not alone, that the troubles and challenges faced by the heroes, heroines, and even the not-so-nice characters are very similar to those we face in our everyday lives. Their antics and adventures and shortcomings mirror our own triumphs and difficulties. Fiction resonates with us because it shows us truths through compelling stories and creative narratives. We get introduced to big ideas that just don't speak to us the same way in a nonfiction format. Fiction encourages freedom of thought through creativity. After all, it's not the text in and of itself, fiction or not, that is sacred. The text becomes sacred when we approach it as being worthy of attention and contemplation. If we're open to accepting the lessons that may be found both in the written word and between the lines, we may find insight and blessings in unexpected places. When we enter the world of the characters in a book or the script of a play or even a movie or a TV show, we get to see the world from a perspective of people or other beings, which we may never get a chance to experience for ourselves. We get a glimpse of how different ways of thinking or acting might change our lives or make a difference in the lives of others. We also begin to understand the reasons behind their actions, and we can translate that information into an understanding of our own stories and the stories of those around us. The tradition of storytelling is part of many cultures. Using parables and fables as spiritual tools is not a new concept. It's an integral part of the rituals and spiritual practice of people around the world. Prophets and sages have always told stories as a way of sharing knowledge and comforting their flocks. Myths and legends have always been used to explain the great mysteries and to give guidance. After all, isn't religion just people wondering about where they came from and why they're here and what happens next after we die? And whether inspired by the divine or not, the traditional spiritual texts are all the thoughts and explanations people came up with to serve as a guide as we figure out how to live with one another and what makes our lives meaningful. In all probability, many of the nonfiction traditional spiritual texts are not fully nonfiction. Some of the most referenced and best loved stories of the New Testament of the Christian Bible are the parables. And a parable is just a story that is used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. It is not necessarily a retelling of an actual event. Let's take a look at the story of the Good Samaritan. So Jesus is preaching to his followers when a scholar asks him what one must do to get into heaven. Jesus responds by asking the scholar what the law, the sacred text, says about it. the scholar, quotes the scripture. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Still, the scholar, who one assumes was an intelligent and educated man, isn't sure what the text means. So he goes on to ask, but who is my neighbor? Jesus responds with the telling of a story. He tells of a man who was mugged and left lying in a ditch, beaten and half dead. When upstanding members of the man's community, of his faith, pass by, they don't help him. In fact, they cross the street to avoid him. But a passing Samaritan, a member of a group of people who were, in those times, often hated and mistreated as they were considered to be unclean, saw this injured man as his neighbor. He came to the man's aid, arranged for his care, and covered the cost. Although the questioner, the scholar, had read and recalled the information from the Holy Scripture, the nonfiction section, he had not been able to figure out how to relate that information to real life. Jesus understood this, so he offered an example, a story, that showed how the law should be applied. After hearing the story, the scholar understood the meaning of the scripture and realized that all people are our neighbor. We're all part of the interconnected web. Many of the texts that are considered holy or sacred are filled with shoulds and shouldn'ts, musts and must-nots. Traditional sources of wisdom can be confusing, preachy, and they sometimes sound like instruction manuals. The words of the great prophets at times set the goals so lofty that they seem unattainable to us mere mortals. The ancient sages' words and deeds are laudable and insightful, but not always easy for us to apply to our own lives. Fictional stories allow us to see ourselves and explore possibilities in a less threatening, less judgmental way. When we read or hear about the deeds of our fictional friends, we can see that they, like us, are flawed. They may become confused or need to ask for or accept help from others. They often have the same daily cares we do. They worry about their families and relationships. They have bills to pay and work to get done. And we can relate to those struggles. In many ways, they are more real to us than the prophets of old. For example, let's take a look at Atticus Finch. I'm going to make an assumption here, which is something I don't usually do, but I'm going to assume that you're all familiar with To Kill a Mockingbird. My apologies if you're not. This book had a great impact on me when I was very young and just beginning to figure out how to be in the world. Atticus was a loving father and a lawyer in the Deep South during the Depression. In the story, he defends a person of color who was being tried after being accused of attacking a white woman. By representing this man, Atticus put his reputation at risk and that of his family as well. And what's more, he lost. He failed. He didn't save the day. He didn't keep an innocent man from being convicted. He didn't even keep him alive. But he set an example in both word and deed that was never forgotten by his children. Yes, the book is loosely based on the author's childhood. However, it is a work of fiction. And I know some of you are thinking, but what about the second book, Go Set a Watchman? I don't know if you've read that one, but the author, Harper Lee, did not want the book published. And I think it may be because she knew how beloved Atticus was to so many people, and that learning of his failings would really sadden those of us who considered him a hero. Like many people, I was upset to learn that Atticus, who in To Kill a Mockingbird seemed to be supportive of the rights of African Americans, was actually deeply prejudiced, and at least in his later years. His hateful actions and beliefs were unpardonable. He was a man who was a product of his time and surroundings, but that does not excuse his intolerance. Yet perhaps the real takeaway from these stories is that no one is all good or all bad. No matter what prejudices and biases Atticus had, for a moment of time, he was able to step outside of those boundaries and beliefs to do what was morally and ethically right. He wasn't perfect, far from it. He wasn't always nice or right or kind, but there was goodness in him. May that be said of all of us. When we enter the lives of imaginary characters, we increase our understanding of others. When we put ourselves in their shoes, we grow our capacity for empathy. Using our imagination helps activate the regions of our brain responsible for enabling better understanding of the way others think and for seeing the world from a new perspective. It increases the brain's capacity to construct a map of other people's intentions. Stories offer an opportunity to identify with the characters' longings and frustrations, to guess at their hidden motives, to eavesdrop on their innermost thoughts. And we get to observe the encounters with their friends and enemies, their lovers and neighbors. When we read about a situation, it's actually very nearly as if we are feeling or experiencing it ourselves. We've all had that situation where we come to the end of the story and go, oh, I miss that person now. The plots and storylines of creative authors help us to explore ideas and complex emotions and the unknown. It's similar to the way scientists run a computer simulation to solve complex problems. When we follow the imaginary adventures of others, we develop something called fluid intelligence. Now, this allows us to solve problems without having any prior knowledge of the subject matter. What this means is that when we're in a sticky situation, one that we've never been in before, and which we've never been trained to handle, but we need to quickly find a solution, fluid intelligence kicks in. We use the knowledge learned through seeing how others solved a similar problem, and we apply it to our own lives. I suppose the effectiveness of this is directly related to the actual books that you've read and contemplated. For me, I now know that if I should ever happen to receive a blow to the head and wake up in the court of King Arthur, or find myself stranded on Mars and needing to grow potatoes, I'm able to handle that. Should feel better because of that, I'm sure. In traditional religions, there are many of the UUs begin their spiritual journey. The sacred text is assigned. In the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the texts are considered to be given, written, or blessed by God. In some other faiths, the words are those of prophets and sages. But in our favorite fictional stories, the protagonists are most often ordinary men and women. Only in fiction are we able to delve deep into the lives of others. By the way, statistically, fiction features a heck of a lot more strong, successful women, and it is significantly more diverse regarding gender, sexuality, culture, and race than nonfiction. Even if we are well-traveled or study the history of those who came before us or study diverse cultures, not one of us will ever have an opportunity to actually visit all the people and places that we see only in our dreams or in the pages of fiction. Reading sacred texts turns our awareness inward. It helps us to consider deep philosophical questions and to think about the reality beyond our sometimes mundane day-to-day existence. It helps us maintain a balance between the world we live in and our inner selves. In spending time contemplating words of great writers, we have a fantastic way to expand the mind, increase awareness, and delve into the deep questions of life and spirituality. Stories show us that we are not alone. They bring us through dark times. They let us know that others go through the same things we do. And if the characters that we love and respect can get through those tough times, so can we. For me, many of the words and ideas that have touched my soul and heart have come from those who have never drawn a breath in real life. My greatest sources of inspiration have been the likes of Albus Dumbledore, who taught me that happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if only one remembers to turn on the light, and that it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. There was a little prince who made me aware that a rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single man contemplates it, bearing within him the image of a cathedral. A Grinch and a Scrooge showed me that being rich and having wealth has very little to do with money. Shakespeare told me that simply changing the name of something doesn't change what it actually is. A slightly chubby little stuffed bear with a fondness for honey taught me the value of remaining close to my childhood friends. And the poetry of Robert Frost led me to choose some paths that were less well known, but took me on some wonderful adventures. Whether it's sci-fi, mystery, poetry, children's books, or the classics, if the words touch us and speak to who we are as a person, it is a sacred text. As the folks from the podcast Harry Potter and the Sacred Text say, fiction doesn't help us escape from the world. It helps us live in it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to sing Guide My Feet. That's in the gray hymnal, number 348, or on the screen.
I think this song has a fun part for the men if you're up for it. Instead of watching up here to look in your hymnal, the men could do this. That'd be the fun part. Oh, brother guide, or the second one would go, oh, sister guide, so. Sister guide. It makes it a little more fun. Oh, I see. Yeah, so why don't we stand and we'll sing all 4 verses. Here we go.
This chalice was lit in honor of our legacy of challenges to orthodoxy, dedication to freedom, and love of sweet truth. As we extinguish this chalice and prepare to leave this place, carry that legacy with you and hold it, not pridefully or self-importantly, but with humble thanksgiving.
Blessed is the path on which you travel. Blessed is the body that carries you upon it. Blessed is your heart that has heard the call. Blessed is your mind that discerns the way. Blessed is the gift that you will receive by going. Truly blessed is the gift that you will become on the journey. May you go forth in peace.
Postlude and then announcements.
Oh, okay. Didn't know what was going on. When I was practicing these waltzes, I couldn't sit still, so if you feel like getting up and moving around, we've done this before, you can waltz with each other.
Time for announcements. First one is somebody has lost some keys. Please come and claim them if they are yours. Another announcement today at 12:15, we're having a discussion here on Article 2 of the UUA, the change they want to make to some of our principles and purposes. And we had a very good discussion yesterday on Zoom, and hopefully some of you can continue it today. Wednesday the 19th, and I don't know if it's gotten the pedals, but at 9 a.m. The hiking group is meeting here, and we're going to Catherine Creek in Washington, a beautiful place of flowers in the Columbia Gorge. And you can actually go back there every month, April, May, and June, and see different flowers. So we could think of this as a first iteration. So 9 o'clock on Wednesday here. And plant swap on Saturday, April 22nd, from 10 to 12. The Oregonian was 9 to 11, so if you get here at 9, Keen will be here, but officially it's 10 to 12. And bring what plants and tools and pots and plant books that you want to exchange, whatever. Okay, and I believe that Keen has an announcement.
Plant swap is one of the things I wanted to just make sure everybody's aware of. And the other one I already really handled, which was thanking people for being here for the see-through time. And we have one other thing coming up in the future, which is going to be the storyteller Will Horniak on the 17th of June. So we look forward to the 17th of June, and Will Horniak and everybody just kind of put that on your calendar to do like a really good showing for him. There will probably be a small fee for that, and we will probably donate that also to one of our local charities.
And I don't know if there's anybody who has not seen Will Horniak yet, but he's amazing.
I'm gonna just say one more thing. We did a cleanup here yesterday, and Linda was here, and I was here, and Larry was here, and Cynthia was here, and we got a lot done in a lot of different corners. There's a lot more to do, so anytime you have an urge to come home, trim bushes, clean up leaves, do other things, just bag it and leave it. Dandelions. You want to bag it and leave it, I'll find it.
And there's also plenty to do inside, which is where I was working. Yeah.
Yep, there's always more leaves and more dandelions. Are there any other announcements?
Eric, you want to hold those offertory baskets up? You see those baskets? Those aren't the right ones. I think it was the 4th Sunday in March, the real ones disappeared. If anybody knows where they are, or if they still have money,
Especially the money.
Yeah. So we had to scramble to find something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I'm just, people cleaning up and then they put it sometime in place, find like 50 years, but
Yeah.
if you know where they are. And some wonderful souls made coffee. So if there are no other announcements, it is time to get up and have some coffee and fellowship.